Hey everyone, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made this track in the style of Moderat. So before we get into it, two things. One, I know my pronunciation of Moderat is really terrible. I'm sorry for that one. And two, you can get all the project file and samples and MIDI and presets from this video in the description, so make sure to check that out as well. And yeah, let's dive in. So the first sound I have here is this choir sound. It sounds like this. So the way I made this sound was basically I took this thing and I basically made these two like notes that sort of are a drone. They just hang over the whole thing. It's just C and A. So kind of like a weirdly inverted A minor chord, because if I put that C up an octave, you see we have an A minor. And then underneath that I just have these notes, which are just the bass line. If I open up the bass MIDI real quick, you can see, yeah, it's the same thing. It's just playing the bass line minus those little notes where it jumps up there. So yeah, so pretty simple as far as the notes go. I have this little quarter note at the start cut out, and to go along with that, I automated the track on off just so it would like turn off for that little glitch part. So yeah, now as far as the sound goes for this, I used this preset from Ableton's Voices thing here. It's the Spacious Choir. I think it's FM synthesis. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. I just did it because it sounded like the most realistic choir out of Ableton's sounds. And yeah, so what I have on there is we have a bit of redux. I have it on the soft mode, so it's just doing a little bit of bit crushing to make it sound a little bit more digital and kind of like textured. If we turn it off, you can hear it's a lot cleaner, a little bit more boring. So the next thing we have after that is an OTT, which is just adding a bit of kind of like insane multiband compression. We can hear without it. And then with, it's just sort of bringing out a lot of those high frequencies. The next thing we have here is the Haas effect, which, if you don't know what the Haas effect is, essentially, it's very simple. You just take the sound, split it into the left and the right ears, and then you move one of them slightly forward by a certain amount of milliseconds. And there you get this cool, like, stereo, big, wide sound. So the way I created the Haas effect here was I made this audio effect rack, and you could do this all on your own as well inside of Ableton. Or if you get this project file, it's in there, and you could just take it from there. But yeah, so the way I made this one was I made this audio effect rack. I made two chains, a right chain and a left chain. The right chain is completely dry, and the left chain has the simple delay on it with the dry wet up 100%, no feedback. The two delay times are linked, so it's just mono. And then we have the time set to 10 milliseconds. So that's what gives it the delay. If I turn this off, it's a lot less stereo. And then when I turn it back on, you can hear it just really opens up the width there. So then the next thing we have here is this compressor, which is just sidechaining to the kick. And then we have a bit of an EQ8 here, just cutting out some low end. So the next sound we have is this little granular synth, which sounds like this. This is pretty simple. It's just this little vocal stab that I put into the Ableton Live Max for Live granulator, whatever you want to call it. I just put it down in there. I already checked its tune to C, so I didn't need to do anything. But then once I put it in there, I just turned on the grain a little bit, or I turned it up a bit. And I turned up the spray a little bit. Now, as far as effects go on here, I have this sidechain and this low cut, pretty simple, and then that volume is unnecessary. But yeah, so I just have a sidechain to the kick, and then I'm just cutting out some low end. Pretty simple there. I'm just playing this A, which just kind of serves as like a drone underneath everything. You can hear when I turn it off, the mix feels a lot more empty. So the next thing we have is this lead, which sounds like this. So the way I made this sound was with analog. We have a lot of MIDI effects on that. But basically the way I made it was I took these notes, they're just triplets like of these chords. But you can see these high notes those are just the minor or the major seventh, I believe, of these chords. Yeah, so like in this case, for example, it's just a major seventh. And then on some of them, I think it's the minor seventh. Or it could just be that note all the way through. Yeah, so you can see it kind of changes a little bit. When I was writing this, you know, I was just kind of going off of feeling. And this is what came out. Now, as far as the sound goes, we just have this analog patch. It's pretty simple. We just have 2 saw waves going into a low pass filter with the envelope set like this, so that's what's giving it kind of like the juicy sound. If I turn that off, you can hear it's a lot more messy and distorted. So then after that, I have the amp envelope just set like that, and I have some vibrato. So then outside of analog, we have a little bit of reverb here. It's pretty short, you can see, and the K time or the dry wet is pretty low. But it's just giving us that sound. And then it's going into the overdrive, which is set. The dry wet is up 100%, and you can see we have quite a bit of drive. So this is where a lot of this sound is coming from. It's all about the combination between this overdrive and this OTT. So if I turn off both of those, you can hear it's pretty boring. Like, it's a pretty basic synth block. But then when I turn the overdrive on, you can hear that's what brings out like the kind of like crunchiness. It makes this sound almost like less like a saw wave and more almost kind of like a brass or like, you know, some kind of like horn sound or something. And the OTT is what takes it over the edge there. Because it's grabbing all those high frequencies that we kind of lost with this distortion and it brings them back out. So after the OTT, I just have a bit of a side chain. This is just being side chained to the kick, and then a low cut. And yeah, and then the only other thing I done in that was I do have this little automation for the track on-off there at the start, just like I had on the choir and I guess all these other melodic layers. But yeah, so then the next thing we have here is this bass, which sounds like this. And so this is just a simple respace. It's just following the chords. Really nothing too crazy with the MIDI there. Now one thing I will say is I had to try a few different types of basses because I tried a lot of different ones for this. I tried just like a regular sub. I tried a bass that was following like the kind of triplet pattern that this is doing. And like just a lot of different things. And the one that sounded the best to me was this Reese. And I hear these kind of basses a lot in Moderat's tracks, so I figured I would talk about it in this one. So the way that I made this bass was I took 2 saw waves in operator. You can see 2 saw waves. And we have this FM algorithm, so it's not doing any FM. They're just playing together at the same time. And then I have a little bit of the fine tune turned up on the second saw wave. So that's what's giving it the like detuned effect. I turn that off. Yeah, you can hear it's just kind of flat and boring. And then I just have that going into a low pass filter. So then after that, we just have a bit of chorus. It's just, you know, set like that to make it kind of big in stereo. And then I have that going into this compressor, which is side chaining into the kick. So yeah, with this bass, it's pretty simple. The key here really is just to make like a big bass that just ties the whole thing together. Like, I think the reason why this bass worked the best is because it's the simplest. It's not taking away from anything else that's going on. Between this layer and this layer, that's a lot of sound. And then you add this one. It's like there's really no room for the bass to be doing anything other than just sort of like keeping the foundation of the track. So yeah, that was how I made that. Now, the next layer we have is this kick, which sounds like this. It's pretty simple. It's just a nice punchy kick. And yeah, and then the next thing we have is this clap, which sounds like this. And same thing, I don't really have any processing on this one, but it's just a nice sounding clap. It just fit into the mix nicely. It feels kind of like weird and quirky to me, and I think part of the reason for that is because of this. So if you look at this clap here, you can see I moved it back a little bit. You can hear too. it's not hitting right at the same time as the kick. So that's what gives it that kind of like weird feel, I think, is just that it's a little bit behind the beat. If we put it perfectly on the beat, you can hear it's a little bit more boring. I feel like this sounds a lot more Moderat, for sure. So that was what I did with the clap. I just put it a little bit behind the beat. And yeah, so then the next thing we have is just this little hi-hat. It's pretty simple. Although, fun fact, what I did with this was, if you listen to it in the full track, you can hear it has quite a bit of that same triplet feel that the lead has. And so the way I accomplished this was actually not by doing any triplets in the MIDI. If you look in here in the MIDI, this is very straight. It's just on the upbeats. But then what I did was I used this track delay over here to sort of scoot it back a bit. So if you don't know what track delay is, it's essentially the same as moving all the contents of your track over like to the right a little bit like this. But you just do it with this little knob. You activate it by pressing this little D icon here, and there you go. You should have the little slider. And yeah, so I just turned that up a bunch. And that was how I got that, like, you can really hear it now. But that was how I got that kind of like triplet feel out of there. With, like, doing it this way is a little bit more organic. The thing is that if I just, you know, put this on triplet grid and started moving these and stuff, it wouldn't be quite as, like, real or organic because it's just perfectly on that grid. Like, it still would sound kind of cool and off, but it's not going to be as, like, different and unique as it is when you just do it with the track delay. So then the last thing we have here is just this little FX sound. It's pretty simple. Basically, the way I made it was I took this, just like an old school kind of like effect sound I heard. And then what I did was I put the grid on triplets here. And you can see I just chopped it to random parts. So that's why it sounds like the filter is kind of like opening and closing, because in the sample, it's just a filter opening and then closing. And then I just took random chops from that. So then the way I processed this was I just have a bit of Redux on here with the soft setting. And then we have a bit of OTT. So you can hear those two are definitely pretty important if you're trying to make this sound. And then I have it sidechained to the kick. Now, one fun fact about this I will say is, when you use OTT, there tends to be a lot of low end added to the sound. And in the case of this, I can hear it quite a bit. But if you notice, I didn't put an EQ8 on here. And the reason for that is because, obviously, usually you would want to cut out any kind of extra low end like that, especially in a song like this. But because the only two things playing at this moment in the track are the kick and this little FX sound, you actually don't really need to, because the only reason you would need to get rid of that is if it was clashing with the bass. But since there's no bass playing here, we didn't actually need to cut out that low end. So, yes, that was how I made that. So that's going to be it for today, guys. You know, like I said, the main things to think about are kind of like these big, you know, like pads that I made with the choir, and then the cool lead, and the simple bass that sits underneath everything, and then the simple drums as well. So like I said, that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to check out the samples and project file from this video and MIDI in the description as first link. You can't miss it. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and check out my social media, which is all on the screen now. Thanks again, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.